Stay safe out there. Let's bring in political analyst Rich Rubino now. Rich, we heard from now Mills and Jorge, Chicago and Portland. It seems like a real focus of these protests today were the immigration policies by the Trump administration.
Yes, absolutely. That seems to be the flagship issue. There are other issues, one of them being the views that a lot of people have that Donald Trump has usurped power from the United States Congress, from other branches. But it's also interesting that it's not only in the big cities, but it's also in the smaller cities as well. The altarpiece is obviously places like New York and Los Angeles, but the protests are everywhere from Presque Isle, Maine to the Northern Mariana Islands.
It's interesting, too, because these protests are happening as we also have some new polling from the Associated Press. It says nearly 2/3 of Americans disapprove of the president's job performance in his second term. Republicans, for their parts, they have called today's rallies Hate America rallies. But what should be the response from the Trump administration as we see these approval or disapproval numbers, and then organizers telling us 1 million people took to the streets today?
Yes, and this certainly does not bode well for the president. I think that the fact that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, for example, suggested that this was a pro-Hamas, a hate America type of a rally, what's going to happen is that you galvanize the other side, you galvanize the base. And what usually happens when a president's elected the first time in the or the second midterm election, almost invariably the party loses seats. In the 6th year of a presidency, Bill Clinton picked up seats in 1998. The country was outraged at the potential impeachment of him. That was the first time a party picked up seats since James Monroe's party in 1820, for example, so 1822 rather. So what does that mean? That means that it's a lot easier to galvanize the other side to come out, people who are very much antagonistic to the president than those who are vociferous supporters from the president. So I think that when you see job approval rating at 37%, the other thing you see is you see vulnerable Republicans potentially having to distance themselves from President Trump. It's in their political best interest for some of them to vote against the president, so they can go back to their own constituents and exacerbate how they're independent from Donald Trump, or how they're a different type of Republican, or how they're independent-minded.
Right. What is the message then from Republicans, and I guess even from Democrats, as we approach the midterms?
I think for the Democrats, the message is first of all, what they have to do is something like what Newt Gingrich did with the contract with America in 1994. Nancy Pelosi did something similar with the Democrats when they picked up the House, first time in 12 years back in 2006. They need basically a point plan for what they would call, what I think would probably polls the best, would be something about the affordability agenda, specifically what they're going to do, first of all, to check the president, who's very unpopular, but secondary and tertiary, I think they have to show that they have an affordability agenda, and how they're going to try to basically go over the heads almost of the president and force the president to sign it by going to his constituents, by going to people that are in red congressional districts, for example, people who believe that their health care is being truncated. They potentially could go to their congressman, go to their senator and say, we demand that you vote for this Democratic proposal if the Democrats become hegemonic over both the House and the Senate. But they really need to control at least one branch of government to have really any control or any say politically.
Yeah. These protests, of course, happening with the backdrop, too, of the government shutdown about to enter its third week. Democrats and Republicans have each blamed each other, but it seems like we're sort of at a stalemate here as far as these conversations go. What needs to happen on Monday to get some movement here?
There has to be some sort of an agreement where each side can save face. I think for the Democrats, I think, are seeing a little bit of blood here. They're seeing that they have an advantage in terms of talking about the idea of Obamacare, which was very unpopular, by the way. When it was passed in 2010, the Democrats lost 63 seats that year, the most any parties lost in Franklin Roosevelt in 1938. But since then, it's become very popular, and it's become very popular in some red states as well, including in Mike Johnson's congressional district, where a lot of people, for example, in places like Shreveport, rely on Medicaid, for example. So I think that in terms of these subsidies, I think that the Democrats have to go to the Republicans and say, maybe we'll have a 2-year, maybe 2-year, maybe 3-year window, but we have to have some sort of a resolution that we can continue for the government to continue for at least a couple weeks or at least a couple months. And I think that the Republicans might potentially, if they're looking at the polling and they're trying to figure out a way to get out of this, they might at least partially cave in, but make it look like it's some sort of a Pyrrhic victory.
All right, we'll see what happens come Monday if these conversations continue. Rich Rubino, thanks for your analysis on this one.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right, still to